Phumlani Emma Jones, the author of Lessons from Poets Heroes. Please remember to get yourself a copy at a bookstore near you, or you can order on amazon.co.za. I'm speaking to a great man here today on this episode, Colonel Chris Wyatt. He is a retired U.S. Army colonel with extensive security experience in the security sector. He is also a political analyst. He is also a consultant. He has been watching South Africa closely and has been doing great content on YouTube on South Africa-US relations. So he has been watching closely this breakdown of our relations with the United States over the past weeks. So it's a pleasure to talk to Chris. Chris, how are you, sir? Wonderful to talk to you. Wonderful to see you. All good.
Ronnie, thank you for having me on. It's a pleasure. I look forward to our conversation today.
Yeah, Chris. Chris, this is a big situation, at least in my observation. It's the first time, Chris, that in our democracy, that began in 1994, that we have had this breakdown with the US. As far as I remember, right, I was a child in the 90s. I was a teenager in 2000s, and then I went to study around 2010s and then became a professional. At no point do I ever remember this kind of breakdown. What happened, dear Chris? How did we get here?
Well, actually, a lot of people seem to think it's Donald Trump, and they're mistaken in that conclusion. It's not Donald Trump. This predates Trump by a long time. It's been a long time in coming. You see, the world was angry about apartheid, and the world, including the United States, put sanctions on apartheid South Africa and took measures to try to end that unjust system. And things were so exciting in 1994 to finally see everyone get a chance to vote. Remember the 9-hour queues for go-go's standing in line for hours, 80 years old, first time they ever get to vote. And it was a wonderful moment. The Rainbow Nation and Madiba came in with a very pragmatic approach of reconciliation for all parties. And South Africa got off to a good start. And then the world lost interest. In some ways, I think of Francis Fukuyama as the end of history. In some ways, for the West, April 27th, 1994 was the end of history as far as South Africa is concerned. So South Africa was allowed to do on the international stage pretty much what it wanted. It would interject itself in affairs in Cote d'Ivoire, in Burundi, in Ethiopia, Eritrea, and Central Africa Republic, all around the continent with nary a word from the West or nary any questions. And what happened is that over time, the ANC, in my view, became arrogant that they could do whatever they wanted and no one was going to question what they did. So as the old fossils from the liberation era died off or left the stage, the younger generation, which tends to happen in liberation movements, the next generation, which really didn't experience the period that we're talking about, either they were small children or like yourself, maybe a teenager and didn't really see much of it, and then or born afterwards, but they embrace the old ideologues and the old ideas of communism, socialism. But what's happened is that over the past several years, the offenses from the U.S. perspective against U.S. national interests and against our security interests in particular have manifested in ways that are detrimental to our relationship. We have looked the other way as a nation, as has the West, and continue to give foreign assistance to South Africa because of our concern about HIV and gender-based violence, which is where the money's been going mostly. But now that's over. Donald Trump, this is not the man that was elected in 2016. This is not the man that was elected in 2020, or wasn't elected in 2020, excuse me.
Yeah.
This is not the man. This is the man that was nearly assassinated twice that we're aware of publicly. And there were other attempts that are classified, people don't know about. But this is a very different man on a mission. He's 78 years old, and he's trying to roll back the nonsense. The pendulum has swung so far to the left with crazy ideas that the world is trying to shift back and balance towards the center. So that's what's going on with Trump. But this situation manifested very clearly in February of 2024, and the South African government completely ignored it, missed it. In February of 2024, members of the House of Representatives introduced a resolution to review the relationship with South Africa, to do an investigation, to consider sanctioning senior members of the ANC and members of the South African government for their actions against the U.S. and potentially for corruption. Yeah. That bill, of course, didn't go anywhere because the House was controlled by the Republicans, but the Senate by the Democrats, and Biden was president. Well, that bill has been resurrected by Representative Ronnie Jackson from Texas, who was Trump's personal physician and Obama's personal physician when he was in the military, but now he's a congressman. He's put a bill in there to look at this investigation, and it's bipartisan. There are Democrats and Republicans that are thoughtful of the ANC's actions that run counter to our national interests, and that's kind of where we sit right now.
It's quite unfortunate. I mean, I've been saying the same thing as well, Chris, to my audience, to my what I've written. I've been saying it's not just Trump. There were things that were building up, Chris. I mean, even during the Biden administration, the U.S. has always been concerned, and you are exactly right when you say that over the past 30 years of our democracy, the ANC thought it could do anything and anywhere around the world, including antagonizing the US, which is what it has been doing in recent years. And now we are here. And my view has been that this fallout, I hold our leaders responsible for this. It could have been avoided. We could have, did things right when it comes to foreign policy. And my argument, Chris, has been that the foreign policy we have pursued over the years has not been the foreign policy that puts the interests of South Africans first. It's been the foreign policy of the ANC elite and the ANC interests. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, my thoughts are exactly, Phumlani, we're drinking from the same Kool-Aid here, the same cappuccino. By the way, I'm having a red cappuccino. Hopefully you have a red cappuccino in front of you. But no, so that rooibos makes a good cappuccino. No, I agree 100% with what you're saying here. The actions of the ANC are geared towards caters. So there's 63 million people officially in South Africa, not including the 6 or 8 million illegals that are here, but 63 million South Africans. And I think that the ANC works for 550,000 caters and BE tenderpreneurs. That's who they're there for, not for Black South Africans, not for coloreds, not for Indians, not for whites. They're there for the elites. And let me give you one example of something that has put South Africa on the back foot. So President Clinton created something called the Africa Growth and Opportunity Act, or AGOA, which most South Africans are now at least a little bit aware of. It's a program that has been around since 2000. It gives African states who agree to abide by certain governance standards to deliver education, healthcare, security for residents or citizens of their country. If they agree to meet those standards, then the U.S. allows them to have duty-free access into our marketplace. So South Africa ships 25,000 automobiles to the United States every year, duty-free. They make BMWs in Roslyn and Pretoria. They go to the States with no duty, giving them an artificial advantage over BMWs produced in Germany, which have to pay a tariff. Well, that's gone now because of Trump's tariffs. But AGOA, one of the key tenets of the African Growth and Opportunity Act is that a state must recognize private property rights and respect them and protect them. It's clearly written in our law. Now, that's our law. But if a country agrees to participate in AGOA, they have to meet those standards. And if they don't, they're not legally in it. The mere introduction of the Expropriation Without Compensation Act in 2018, when Ramaphosa came into office as president in Parliament, that disqualified South Africa from AGOA. So South Africa has benefited from duty-free access for over 7,000 goods and services to the United States since 2018, when they were illegally in it. Trump took no action against South Africa. People forget that. Biden took no action. Now there is action, but it's not AGOA. It's because of Trump's reciprocal tariff regime. But the point here is South Africa has been getting all kinds of advantages, and they've just been pissing down our leg. And it's not really good. And that's just one example. We could talk about the Lady R. We could talk about training Chinese fighter pilots at South African aviation schools with U.S. and European pilots. That's insane. This is not in our best interest, and it's not something South Africa should be doing if they want relations with the U.S.
Yeah. I listened to Molet Mbeki. I'm not sure if you know him. He's a
Yes, it's Tabo's
political.
brother.
Yeah.
He's the one that wasn't bounced on his head frequently as a child. Tabo was bounced on his head, but unless he wasn't.
Yeah. So I mean, he was saying that in his observation, the U.S. Um, since the since during the apartheid times, the U.S. has been doing a lot to help. Well, back then it was a black movement against the apartheid system. Um, uh, and then came democracy. There were many programs. We've just mentioned one, AGOA. There is this PEPFAR thing that was started by President George W. Bush to fight the HIV disease in South Africa. He says the US has been doing a lot, right? It has shown goodwill, yet South Africa really has taken all of that for granted, right? And it feels that there hasn't been from the ANC an explanation of all these governance practices to American leaders, especially the Republicans. He says that America has shown great goodwill towards South Africa, yet South Africa has tended to do things that basically antagonize the US and go against the interests of the United States. I guess my question to you is, how do you recover from this, Chris? What does the US want at this point in time? It's April 2025. What is the US looking for now? What should South Africa do? What do Americans want?
Well, Americans, for the most part, have no idea about South Africa. They've left that at the end of history in 1994. Most Americans, even in academia, it's not the subject that it was. When I was a university student in the 1980s, South Africa was a big topic on campus, even for people in departments outside of history and political science. But it's rarely talked about except in history and political science departments on campuses. And certainly among the average American, most people know nothing about South Africa or are not interested in it. And unfortunately, geostrategically, South Africa really doesn't matter anymore. In the 60s, 70s, and 80s, South Africa was a very important player in the anti-communism role and with the sea lanes around the Cape of Good Hope. But that's no longer the case today. But what does America as a policy establishment want from South Africa? Quit pissing on our leg. Quit doing things like John Steinheisen meeting with Iranian diplomats tomorrow and then planning a trip to Iran in May.
Sorry, who is this? Who is doing this tomorrow?
John Stein, the Minister of Agriculture, is reportedly meeting with Iranian officials tomorrow.
He's meeting Iran tomorrow.
Yes. That's not a good optic. That's not going to gain you favor with the United States. Also, it's beyond insulting the way that the ANC is approaching this and President Ramaphosa. So they sent Ibrahim Rasool, knowing his animosity and his hatred of Donald Trump in his previous public remarks. So they sent him there, and then as a sitting ambassador, he says what he said in a Zoom session, and he calls Trump the leader of a global white supremacy, which is utter nonsense. That's just propaganda. It's so dishonest. Trump has done more for people of color than most people on this planet have done. That's just the fact, whether people want to accept it or not. And then saying America's a racist country, it's not helpful. So he was sent home. He was Rasooled and sent home, Ibrahim Rasool. But then they sent Nkabisi Jonas over there, who also said horrible things about Trump. To be fair, he said it in his private capacity, not as a sitting diplomat. But nonetheless, that's not the sort of person you want to send if you want to build relations. The good news is that Trump is a business guy, and he's all about getting the deal done, the art of the deal. He's about making progress. And Trump can be very forgiving. Look at who he's put in his cabinet. He's put Democrats in his cabinet. He's put former political opponents in his cabinet, and the cabinet is functioning. It does what he wants it to do. So Trump is probably the right person if you want to right the ship. But South Africa's relationship with the United States is listing heavily to starboard. And somebody needs to put some weight on the other side of the ship to bring it back to the center. Otherwise, that ship is going to sink. But it doesn't look like the ANC is getting it. So now they're talking about picking one of 4 white Afrikaners who are basically ANC cadres to be ambassador. If the ANC thinks that they will appease Trump by sending a white Afrikaner, they're just going to insult him. Trump doesn't care if you're white, if you're black, if you're Indian, if you're colored. He wants a competent person who has the authority to discuss things diplomatically with the United States and fix the relationship. Sending a white Afrikaner is the wrong message. I mean, that's dumb. That's just so we inside the National Executive Committee of the ANC. Apparently, there's opposition because they think that's playing into Trump's racist hand. The fact that people in the ANC think that Trump is a racist shows me how color focused they are and how uninformed they are about who Donald Trump is. And they do so at their own jeopardy. This is a huge own goal by the South African government, and they really need to wake up. I've been pleading with the South African government to wake up and stop committing these own goals. I know they're watching my videos, but I don't think they're listening to me.
Yeah. Now, you've just mentioned something very important. I've just learned about it now. I guess I'm that ignorant. John Steinheisen is meeting Iran tomorrow. I was expecting this government of national unity, Chris, this new coalition government formed after May 2024, after the ANC lost its majority for the first time in 30 years of our democracy. I had expected it to bring some sense, in other words, move to the center on various policy issues. And for things like the pro-Hamas stance to be really, really reduced, right, and substantially. And now you are telling me that John Steinhuisen of the Democratic Alliance, one of the biggest non-ANC partner in the coalition government, is meeting Iran. I had expected our foreign policy as well to make sense now, um, after May 2024. It doesn't seem that's the case. Just to give you another one example, just not long time ago, a few months back, 37 million rands was allocated to this case, genocide case against Israel, right? Allocated by this government of national unity. Our money, my money as a taxpayer, the money I work very hard for, is being used to fight for Hamas on the global stage. And I don't think that's okay. I was expecting these things not to happen under this coalition government. What's going on with this coalition government, Chris? What is your sense
Well,
here?
there's a few things. I've got a lot of sense on this one, not a thoughts on it, but a few things in play here. Number one is that you're not uninformed. I broke that story just about an hour and a half ago about Steinhuisen meeting with Iranian officials tomorrow for a trip to Iran in May. So it just became public knowledge a short while ago after I reconfirmed with multiple sources that my information was accurate.
Yeah.
And in fact, I'm comfortable that that is the case. We'll see if he actually meets tomorrow. This story might upset that, but
Yeah.
so that's the first thing. Second thing is that, of course, Steinhuisen went on an agricultural trip to China recently, and China's a big trade partner, so that didn't irritate the United States. I mean, they're also a big trade partner for us. But Iran is a real issue because there's virtually no trade between Iran. I know Iran joined BRICS in 2023. I'm an accredited journalist with the South African government. I was at the BRICS summit in Santon when that occurred, and Iran, Saudi Arabia, and others joined the BRICS organization then. So I can understand the BRICS relationship. But unless South Africa hopes to ship $14 billion in agricultural exports to Iran to make up for the loss of trade with the U.S., I'm not really sure of the end game here because the relationship is just a few millions of dollars. It can't compensate for anything that you do to offend the United States. Now, my sense of the government is the following, Phumlani, and that is that when the election occurred, by the way, in November of 2021, I will crow about this. After the municipal elections, I looked at the results ward by ward and around the country, and I made a prediction that in 2024, the ANC would get 38 to 42% of the vote. That was in November 2021. I stuck by that. Now, the facts changed, but they changed in a way that allowed me to stay with that prediction, and they got 40.18%. So when this happened, the ANC needed a coalition partner, and the DA is a party they had to have, because they weren't going to be able to get MK or EFF to come in that coalition. Just not going to happen. But as long as Ramaphosa leads the ANC, MK will not join the ANC. So that's not going to happen. So they needed the DA. The DA held all the cards. Yet they walked into a negotiation and they walked out with virtually nothing. They didn't get any of the security cluster, not the intelligence, not the police, not justice, not the military. They didn't get foreign policy. They didn't get the most important ministry, which they could have fixed, which is finance. They got home affairs, which is broken. They got agriculture, which is broken, and education, which is broken. And the ANC is going to take credit for fixing those things as the DA's competent people fix them. So my sense is that this government is a government, not a coalition, but an ANC-dominated agreement that they seem to think they control. I mean, you see this very clearly when the ANC talks about Mashatile and Mabalula and others talking about kicking the DA out of the GNU. They have no such authority. The GNU exists as an agreement between the DA and the ANC. Neither can kick the other one out. One can leave, but neither can kick the other out. The ANC went behind the DA's back after they reached an agreement last year and invited 8 other parties to come into a grand coalition. The DA didn't approve that, and that's where we're at. That shows how weak the DA is and how little negotiating power or influence they have in this government. The ANC is running the country as if they have a majority. And the Patriotic Alliance and the DA and others are just playing along with it to the detriment of South Africans. So the foreign policy has not made any adjustment. If anything, it's been more focused on the traditional rogue states where the ANC has affinity to the detriment of all South Africans.
I've also, even Martin von Staden, he's the head of, I interviewed him on the show not a long time ago, head of policy at the Free Market Foundation. He said the same thing. I was in LA 2 weeks ago, and I had a great time with Joel Pollack, the editor of Breitbart News. Yeah, he has even said it publicly that he was disappointed by the DA's negotiation skills or negotiations last year. The DA came out with nothing, Chris. Right, basically with nothing. And the people who would defend that would say, well, it's better than nothing, right? Rather have your
No.
put in that. But I thought that it really was it was a powerful force in the negotiations. They could have done better. What's going on in the DA? Where do you think the DA is? Why is it so weak? Is it because they just said, well, look, let's get in and be cabinet ministers?
Well,
What's going on in the
it
DA?
certainly
Yeah.
begs the question, is that what the goal was? Because it's certainly not supporting the voters. I mean, look, I understand that the previous parliament approved BELA, the Basic Educational Laws Amendment Act. It also approved the Expropriation Without Compensation Act. But Ramaphosa didn't have to sign those. And he signed both of those things in the darkness of, well, he didn't sign the BELA bill in the darkness, but the expropriation he signed in December and hid that fact, because the South African Constitution gives members of Parliament an opportunity to question the constitutionality of anything signed into law by the president within 30 days. But 1/3 of members of Parliament must sign a letter. It goes to the Constitutional Court. Ramaphosa signed that December 23rd or thereabouts, and he waited till January 22nd or something like that at the World Economic Forum to announce it. So legally, the 30 days were over, and no one could oppose it. And so that was pretty dirty and underhanded, because you have a 30-day period after he signs it. But the DA didn't, I don't know where the negotiators are. Look, the DA reached its apex under Helen Zille in 2014. They had 4,004,000 votes, and they've never achieved that since then. Under Musi Maimani, they lost votes, and under Stein, they've lost votes. So now that the last election, they only got 3,500,000. If they just maintain their 4 million from 2014, if just to maintain that, they'd have a much stronger influence in this government. But the DA spends all its time telling people not to vote for small parties instead of telling people to vote for it for its reasons. And it's very disappointing. To me, it's a lack of leadership and a lot of arrogance. Look, people talk about how arrogant the ANC is. Well, the DA is just as arrogant when it comes to certain things. And it's sad, because there's a lot of talented people in the DA. You've got Jordan Hill Lewis here in Cape Town. You've got Chris Pappas in Howick. You've got Francois Rogers. You've got Andrew Whitfield. There's a lot of talented people in the DA. But the party behaves, they may not be arrogant, but they behave in an arrogant fashion, or at least that's how it comes across to the public.
Martin von Staden said to me that part of the problem with the DA, and I want to get your thoughts here, is that they like to play this holy, they don't want to get brutal. They don't want to fight very hard. They don't want to push very hard, because they fear that they are going to look bad in the public. Oh, the people are going to think we are the bad guys. Let's try and be nicer to these guys. Whereas you look at other political parties, they really push very hard on their ideology. And I think the DA, they get weaker there. They don't fight very hard on what. I'm glad that they've been fighting against the VAT. I do. I'm happy to see that. But overall, they've avoided these nasty political fights, and them somehow trying to, they're scared that they will get some disapproval from the public. And I'm not sure that is helpful. Hey.
Well, I agree with you on that. The thing about politics is people often say, I don't want to be involved in politics. But the sad reality is, if you're not involved in politics, or if you don't pay attention to it, politics comes looking for you. I would ask all the people whose businesses were destroyed during COVID, did you want that? Did you vote for a government that would oppress you and lock you up in your homes over a virus? No, you didn't approve that. Yeah. Did you agree with BEE to give money to tenders and eliminate people racially from the economic sphere? No, you didn't agree to that. Did you agree to Panyazi Lesufi taking over your education departments? And no, you didn't. So politics will come looking for you, whether you want politics or not. And here's the other comment about politics. It's a blood sport. Politics globally is a blood sport. Yeah. It's for kids. It's for all
values. Yeah. Hot.
And the DA doesn't play as if they're it's like they're all trying to have tea with Helen. Hello, we're just here to talk about politics today. No. Yeah. You've got to get in there and get in the pit and get dirty. And it doesn't seem like the DA does that. Maybe they do it in the back rooms and we don't see it, but you need to see that occasionally. Look, I have no respect for the Economic Freedom Fighters whatsoever. That's a vanity project for Julius Malema. But you got to give them credit. During lockdown, they were everywhere making noise all the time and pushing their agenda with voters, and they had traction. But of course, that's been falling off in recent years, as I predicted. They're vanishing. In fact, the EFF doesn't exist in KZN anymore. MK destroyed them in KZN, but they're still powerful in places like Phumlani and Limpopo. So, yep.
Yeah. So, Chris, let's talk about now South Africa's decision to take Israel to the International Court of Justice. accusing Israel of genocide in Gaza. Um, I have asked one question, Chris, and that is, why didn't Arab nations, the neighbors of Palestine, why was it not them who took Israel to the ICJ? Why did it have to be done by us, Chris? At the southern tip of Africa, right? We are located right at the bottom of Africa. Why was it us who had to do this? Explain that to me.
Well, there's a lot to unpack here, and some of which we can't prove, but certainly informs supposition and analysis, and I'll share some of that. But first off, your point's very valid. Most analysts are not asking the question, why didn't Egypt or Jordan or Saudi Arabia take the case?
Exactly.
The reason is because the Palestinians are a thorn in the side of most Arab nations. In fact, the majority population in Jordan is not Jordanian, it's Palestinian. And Palestinians are in large numbers in Kuwait and then many other places where they work and involved in the economy, and they have a lot of influence. And so these states didn't want to upset the apple cart. But when it comes to the question of the ICJ and Israel and South Africa, I ask this question. If Israel or South Africa is such a proponent for human rights, that's their argument, and they're against genocide, where was South Africa in Rwanda in 1994? I know it was a new government, so I'll give them a pass on that one. But where was South Africa? Excuse me. Where was South Africa when the Gambia took the unique novel step of taking Myanmar to the ICJ in 2019 over the genocide against the Rohingya Muslims? Where was South Africa? If there's such a in the forefront of humanitarian stuff, and they care about human rights and they worry about genocide, why didn't they defend the Muslims of Myanmar with the Gambia? They could have been a friend of the court and filed an amicus brief, but they didn't do that because they don't care about that. It's nothing to do with that. Where is South Africa about the genocide against the Uyghurs, Muslims in China that are being oppressed and organs harvested and imprisoned? They're nowhere to be found. Where is South Africa over what's happening in the Sahel? Nowhere to be found. Where was South Africa in Tigray when the Ethiopian army executed innocent conscripts by shooting in the back of the head and committed genocide there just a couple years ago? Nowhere to be found. My point is the hypocrisy stinks beyond belief.
Sudan, Chris, the current crisis in Sudan, thousands of people are dying there. Some people are arguing it's worse than what's happening in Gaza.
Well, I could have gone on to Sudan. That's another one. I mean, there's so many examples, but millions of people are displaced in Sudan right now. And where's the ANC? Nowhere. They did go to South Sudan in 2014. I know because I met their military personnel at the airfield in Entebbe because I was based in Uganda and we had our own operations going on then. And so they flew their diplomats out. They didn't help anybody else. So that was in South Sudan when the civil war between Salva Kiir and Riek Machar started. So the hypocrisy is beyond the charts, and nobody asked that question. What problem was South Africa addressing here? They didn't get in the Gambia on the case against the Rohingya. They didn't get in China. They haven't gone in these other places like Sudan. They're very silent on that. So why did it happen? Well, if you look at the timing of it, and I looked at the timing of it, Naledi Pandor made a trip to Tehran. The ANC, I'm not making allegations, but I'm just throwing stuff out there on the wall. The ANC owed 102 million rand for a event organizer from the previous election, which they hadn't paid. The sheriff of the court had gone to Latuli House in 2023 to inventory the items of the ANC for confiscation and public sale at auction. That's how bad things were. They hadn't paid their staff in months. They had no money. The election was coming up. What are they going to do? Well, now Lady Pandor goes to Tehran. She comes back, and just a few weeks later, suddenly the ANC pays its bill to the party that had took them to court, the 100+ million rand. They also held a big birthday bash. I think it was the 113th birthday bash at Umbumbela Stadium in Nelspruit, where they spent 20 million bringing people to the party. Where did the ANC suddenly get 125 million? None of which has ever been declared to the IEC. Not a cent of that has ever been declared to the IEC, which is required by law. So a lot of supposition is that the Tehran financed the ANC in its desperate hours, and so they're doing the marching orders of Tehran. I can't prove that. That's an analysis, that's supposition, but it certainly raises interesting questions. And with John Steinheisen meeting with Iranians tomorrow, you got to wonder.
Yeah. Yes, I mean it's been very interesting to watch. It's been very disappointing as well, I must say. I do hope that at some point sense is going to come through amongst our leaders and we do the right things. Chris Wyatt, he's a retired U.S. Army colonel with extensive experience in the security sector as a political analyst. I'm sure you sensed his understanding of South Africa's politics, Chris. So it's a great honor to talk to you, sir, about this issue. I just do hope that at some point the right things will be done, and I do believe that when I say the right things will be done, I mean the U.S. South Africa relations. I want them restored, and I'm sure you want the
Me
same,
too.
right?
Me too.
But I feel, Chris, that we have, as South Africans, we have more in common with the United States than with China, Iran, Russia, and so on. All these, North Korea, Venezuela, all these despotic regimes around the world. I think we have more in common with the US. That's just my view.
Well, I agree 100% with that perspective. I think that Xhosa, Zulu, Venda, Tswana, Afrikaner, Portuguese, English-speaking South Africans have much more in common with the West and with the United States in particular than they do with the East. So it's a shame. But I will say this as we wrap up. South Africa is a sovereign nation, and the government can take whatever actions it chooses to take vis-a-vis its foreign policy. But if you think that we're going to continue giving you $500 million US in foreign assistance for free and have preferential trade status for your goods when you slap 75% tariffs on our poultry imports here, and you treat us and rubbish us in such a poor fashion internationally, then you're smoking too much DACA. So I would just say that it's not in the best interest of the South African government to continue to antagonize the United States, but they're welcome to do what they like. It's a sovereign state, and they make decisions for South Africans. South Africans have an option. It's called the ballot box, and you've got municipal elections coming up. Let's see what happens.
That's true. Yeah, we do have, we're a democratic society. We do have a chance to bring about new leadership. It's Phumlani Majosi. This is the Phumlani Majosi show. Remember, I'm on X at Phumlani Majosi. Do follow me there. Do subscribe to this channel, and let's grow. Let's have a conversation about the issues that matter to South Africans. Chris, great to talk to you, sir.
My pleasure. Go well.
Awesome. We'll chat soon.